All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the second public forum we're having on community safety. I'm Mayor Emma Mulvaney-Stanak. I want to welcome everyone here tonight and appreciate you coming out this evening. We have a really powerful panel planned for tonight to talk a bit more into, we're trying each one of these forums to go a little deeper into some key topics related to community safety. Because there's so many different overlapping issues, there's complexities, there's nuance, and it's hard to get into great detail in any particular one area if we just did one forum and called it that. So tonight, I'm doing a slightly different format than the one we did 2 months ago. And I just want to give people a little bit of a sense of where we're headed and who's here on the panel with me tonight. So first of all, I just want to mention our panel tonight, we're going to talk a lot about violence and anti-violence measures. We're going to talk about victim services. And we're going to talk about our young people in this city as it relates to violence. And so joining me up here, I'll do a little bit more of an introduction in a minute. We have Nicole Kubon from Steps to End Domestic Violence to speak around violence issues and anti-violence services in our community. Speaking to victims and survivors issues is also Nicole from Steps, but also Rachel Jolly from the Burlington Community Justice Center, and also Mary McAllister from our Burlington Police Department, who is our victims advocate. And then when we talk about youth, we are joined by Shamna Nolan, who is the Executive Director of King Street Center, and coming soon will be former City Councilor Ali Dieng, who is going to be representing the work of the Vermont New American Advisory Council. And then immediately to my right is the Senior Advisor on Community Safety in my office, Ingrid Jonas. She and I will be doing a little bit of a what have we been up to in the last 2 months sort of opening framing. And then we'll talk a little bit with our panelists after that in each of their sort of discipline and topic areas. You hopefully received an index card or two or three or many. That is an invitation, again, a slightly different format tonight for you to write down questions. You could also write down comments. You can draw us pictures, whatever you want to do with those, or take notes. If you need a lot of them, let us know. But we did want to provide more of an opportunity for people to ask questions in real time. And then when you want to turn them in, you can hand them to Aaron or Becky or hold them up and we'll come get them from you. And then we'll spend the last 30 or 40 minutes or so grouping those questions, and either myself or other folks on the panel will do our best to answer those questions. If it's complex, if it needs data, if it needs something we can't turn around in real time, we are planning to post answers on the mayor website rather quickly. We've actually learned from our first forum to make some time to be able to do response afterward. But we do have a commitment of documenting these forums to make sure folks who are not able to be here have an opportunity to learn alongside folks who can be here in person. All this information has a dedicated part on the mayor's website you can find easily. That includes notes and information and resources we shared at the first forum in September. That's all posted right now. And as I said, the notes and the information from tonight, including answers to your questions, will be there as well soon. And then a couple last logistics, the community safety guide, which we shared at the last one. This is an updated version. This is not the end all. It's not perfect, but it's an update and it's helpful. It's a helpful tool for the community to know who to call and gets you a sense of who does what within our community safety response system. This is also available on our website. Since we're talking about victim services, we've also developed this smaller card. It's nice and discreet to encourage folks to know what are those additional services you'll hear about tonight. This is a nice little reference card as well. And then before we get into updates from myself and Ingrid on the sort of the state of affairs here in Burlington and what we've been up to related to community safety, this is my first public event since the outcome of Tuesday's election. And I just want to sort of set the tone and let folks know that there's a lot going on as we process the outcome of the election. There's a lot of feelings. There is a lot of uncertainty. There might be worry for some folks. And I want to make sure folks know that we are staying steady here in Burlington. I feel the steadiest I've ever felt in this job. I understand the need and the responsibility of leading our city forward for everyone to make sure this is a safe community for everyone, that we're inclusive and that we're mindful of what's ahead, and that we can really come together in this moment and be, most importantly, proactive on what's on the horizon coming forward. And that will not deter our work to make sure Burlington is a safe community, again, emphasizing for everyone here who visits here and who chooses to make this their home. So thank you again for being here. And with that, we're going to go into some community safety updates. So I'm going to begin, and then Ingrid's going to go next. I'm not even timing myself, but I'm the mayor. I don't have to time myself for the first part, right? All right, so I want to begin by letting you know, as you might recall, I convened a group of over 20 different individuals throughout the community who are my community safety advisors, and they met throughout the late spring into the summer, and I tasked them with offering me recommendations on how to make our community safer. And they offered me 4 pages, single space, of all sorts of ideas. And I asked them to really prioritize 6 very tangible things we could do to advance. And I'm pleased to say that we've advanced 3 out of those 6 recommendations in a meaningful way. That includes the hiring of we posted the position, hiring of a receptionist position, a staff position to staff the front of the Burlington Police Department building. It has remained vacant for many months. It is very logical for people to go to that space to receive information, to get support resources, access victim services or whatnot. And I appreciate the council approving that position in October. We've posted it and we'll be hiring that position soon. That was one of the 6 recommendations. A second one is continuing to improve our public education on who to call when. We're still in the work of that, but that's partly why we've been getting better at this. Part of that is also making sure we're working with dispatch to make sure that that is an effective 2-way conversation with the community and dispatch to get you the right support you need from our entire response system. The third one in terms of these recommendations is a public bathroom access. We have utilized, I've learned more about GIS than ever before. So we're utilizing various parts of our departments here in the city to map out where public bathrooms exist now, and now we're assessing those gaps. How can we maintain them, keep them safe, keep them open and reliable? So we're halfway through that one, but we're making progress on these recommendations. We have continued to convene weekly a hotspots cross-department strategy group. It involves over 6 different departments. They meet weekly, and we continue to work on areas where behavior is going on. I talked about this at length at the last forum, but I want folks to know that's still happening. We're currently working on City Hall Park, where we've seen an increase of activity there, largely because of the exiting of a lot of folks who were using the motel emergency program and a lot of unmet needs from folks. So we're really trying to grapple with that reality. And I'm going to talk a lot more at the next city council meeting on Tuesday around the unsheltered emergency we're having in Burlington. So if you're interested in that, you can tune in on Tuesday night since Monday is a holiday. We also have a late night task force that's been started and meeting since September or so to think about coordinated ways that the late night scene, so largely bars and restaurants, can better support their employees and have safe businesses where patrons can come, and we can really be thoughtful around coordinating what services we can provide as the city for employee safety, but also issues as they come up in the downtown core. We are underway of starting a process of building a new public safety building. And so we've started this exploration. We're sitting on Memorial Block, but we started this conversation many months ago, knowing that our central fire station, which is that way, is in great disrepair and needing a lot of investments. And as we look forward for all the capital needs and the deferred maintenance in this city, it started to become very clear that we also have a very broken Burlington Police Department building. I don't know if you've been there lately, but it is not in good shape. It's not good working conditions for the folks working there, and we need to do better to have a state-of-the-art facility for both our police and fire services, as well as the public health community service workers who help with our community safety liaison work, our park rangers, et cetera. So we started to envision what this could be. We're working with partners in the community as part of this larger blocks development. Doesn't mean it will be on this block, but we know that this is a smarter, I know this is a smarter strategy of thinking around how do we leverage public dollars and not necessarily waste money in emergency maintenance when we know that building is not necessarily healthy or going to have a long life. We are hiring an overdose prevention center project manager. We've posted the position, it's closed. This will help us, it's a temporary role, help us facilitate robust community engagement on where we site that center. How do we bring the right provider in to provide the services of that center, and then think about location and placement. So that is work to come. The next community safety forum in January will focus all about substance use, and we'll talk a lot more about OPCs at that meeting. Two other just pieces, because Ingrid's going to speak a little bit about a rapid response pilot program we're starting here at the library. So I'm not going to steal her thunder. She'll talk about that. In a couple of weeks, I'll meet with the county sheriff along with other folks here from the city on exploring retail theft and a regional response to this in a way that's tangible and brings the spirit of mutual aid forward. Seeing what's possible, knowing that we are stronger when we can coordinate together and know that this is unfortunately behavior happening all throughout. I benefited from meeting the sheriff for the county at the governor's public safety roundtable he held about 2 weeks ago in Colchester, and we were comparing notes around the increase of retail theft in South Burlington and Williston, and it seems very timely that we come back together and have a regional conversation. And then finally, I will be working with the City Council to beginning a process of reviewing our priority response plan. That's the priority 1, 2, 3 plan that we've been operating under for several years now, to assess its impact on the community, its effectiveness, and also its impact on our police officers, to make sure that we are doing our best to update. Hello and welcome. To update and to have a responsive plan that's meeting 2024's need and making sure that we're being effective in our response, so that you get a call, when you get the right person when you call for help, and that you get a response, whatever that is appropriately within our city's response system. And with that, and again, reminder, if any of that sparked a question, please write it on an index card, flag someone down to get you an index card, because I had to do a high-level review of that. And with that, I'd like you to meet Ingrid Jonas, our Senior Advisor on Community Safety, and she's going to mention a couple more items.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, my name is Ingrid Jonas. I am just 2 months into this new role as advisor on community safety. I'm the senior advisor, but I don't know that there's a junior advisor anywhere. Oh, sorry, yes. I was making a joke that I'm a senior advisor, but I haven't met the junior advisor yet, so. Okay. Okay. I'm going to try to do the mic thing, because people always say that with a mic with me. I'm just going to give a quick overview about what I've worked on and sort of what I've been learning in the last several weeks. And I do want to thank everybody who's welcomed me in to try and help me understand the work that they're doing as part of either the city or either the public safety committee, all the various entities that are working and that are interfacing and struggling, frankly, with the various aspects of community safety and sort of a sense of fear, disorder, and really wanting to roll up their sleeves and work to make things better. So thank you, because so many of you have helped me understand how things have been working or not working in the city. I want to just mention that one of the really main observations that I think you all have made, but that I've made in this short amount of time, is just that the system hasn't really been developed to work cohesively. So we have emergency responders who are working hard all the time. We have amazing community service providers and health providers, and people are standing up systems to try and address what they're faced with in their work, but there isn't sort of a way for these entities to work cohesively and to be deployed most effectively or most efficiently to answer the need. So I think that is one area that I've been charged with, to sort of help the system be more responsive and cohesive. Along those lines, we have an opportunity next week to attend sort of a internationally renowned program that is referred to as a situation table. It's not a way to create a new entity, but it's a way for existing entities that provide services to use a quick system to determine folks who are in the highest need of intervention or interruption of either behaviors or other issues that people are struggling with, and picking the right resources to deploy and sort of do this like intensive intervention to try and get folks the help they need, and to figure out what the barriers have been from some of the sort of chronic issues that people are struggling with. So I'm pretty hopeful that there's a team of people who are in this community now, many in this room, who are sending folks down. We're going to Bennington next week for 2 days This is an initiative that the state of Vermont has brought into Vermont, and it's, again, hosted in Bennington, but they've invited us to be at the table. So I think that'll be a good opportunity. Again, that's not a new construct or a new entity, but it's a way to better organize and mobilize all of the folks that are doing the work now, but to do so in a more efficient way. Mayor Mulvaney-Stanak mentioned the rapid response pre-charge pilot. So that terminology is fairly new to me, and so I just want to break it down. So rapid response, meaning there's a chronic need for behaviors to be intervened in. Pre-charge, meaning pre-criminal charge, so not needing to, the behavior hasn't risen to the level where police are necessarily the right response, but something has to happen immediately. And so the CJC has stepped up. The library has offered to be the pilot. The library has set up this amazing structure as it is, but the way that it would work would be the CJC would be working here at least one day a week to start, but also available on a more regular basis so if there was a behavior or activity going on here, the library and staff could come in, intervene, and say, this is a behavior that is resulting in your not being what's called trespassed from here, so you're not able to continue being here for 180 days. I will give you the option of either adhering to that or working with this person from the Community Justice Center as a way to kind of earn your way back in to this public space that's meant for everybody to be comfortable and safe. So I just want to thank the library and also the CJC for providing those resources. We will, of course, always have the option of relying on our police department if things get beyond that ability to intervene. But yeah, that's something that's exciting, at least to try in the pilot here with the option to reevaluate and then move it beyond this level. I think it really helps with the library because to be able to have that trespass thing as kind of leverage and something to earn your way back into this space. I hope I'm not being offensive in how I'm describing that in any way, but I think it's an excellent place to start the pilot. Do you want to add anything to that, Rachel? Okay. And also just in closing, looking at other peer cities that are perhaps a bit ahead of us in the ways that they've organized resources. I met with Albuquerque, folks from Albuquerque a couple times now, and it's pretty exciting what they're doing there. They have what started as a 5-person pilot of just intensive intervention workers who work in partnership with the police department and the fire department. But it's just really interesting and innovative the way that they've built this in as just an equal part and not sort of a subdivision of either one of those entities that are so critical to the public safety, but they have their own freestanding entity that works sort of hand in glove with fire and police, and it's just been incredible, some of the work that they've done. So some inspiring communities to learn from. And with that, I will pass the mic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. All right, so now we're going to hear from some of our community partners around, again, starting first with some context and information from one of our local advocacy and social service agencies, Steps to End Domestic Violence. Nicole is here with us, and we've asked her to speak a little bit to anti-violence strategies out there. They do such incredible, you all do such incredible work, and I think it's particularly known, especially during COVID, around the intensities and the and just the realities that a lot of folks are experiencing from all sorts of intimate partner, et cetera, violence. But I am really appreciative that you're here tonight. And what I'm going to do for all of our folks is I'm going to gently time you and just give you a little nudge just to keep us on track so we can make sure we have a good Q&A portion of tonight. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Mayor. As she said, my name is Nicole Kubon. I am the Executive Director at Steps to End Domestic Violence. I've been with Steps since right in the middle of the beginning of COVID. So I've been through a lot of changes for the organization and for our community. I am tasked with kind of introducing anti-violence work and strategies, but I by no means can speak to the ways that we all do it. I think there are some themes in our work and strategies that are similar, but we are serving, all folks across population. At Steps to End Domestic Violence, we specifically work with folks who have been impacted by intimate partner violence, and that's pretty much the only thing I could say is consistent across all folks we serve. All types of different folks experience the impacts of domestic violence, whether they have experienced it themselves or in their family systems or in their communities. So I want to speak to the diversity of folks' experiences. I'm going to briefly just go over the services that we provide and how that kind of works within the different strategies that I see as primary to anti-violence work. But like I said, there are different approaches to these strategies. So at STEPS, we provide a couple of 24/7 services that we call emergency services or crisis services. We have a 24/7 hotline that's there to support survivors anytime they need it, but also to support anybody who's looking for information on how to support survivors or break cycles of violence in their households or access resources and referrals to our community partners and supports. And we also provide emergency housing services. We run a 21-unit shelter and also a motel pool overflow program that at any given time we've served probably about 40 plus households that are fleeing domestic violence. So it's a really huge and central part of the work that we do. We also provide housing support services to really try to invest in long-term stability and success for survivors and folks who've experienced violence. And family and children services is something that we've really been expanding our work in to really start to integrate prevention across all programming. We see family-focused services as really primary and central to breaking cycles of violence and doing real meaningful prevention work in our community. We also provide legal program services to connect with our law enforcement and support folks accessing those resources, including relief from abuse orders, things like that. We offer a legal clinic for advice with pro bono attorneys. And we also provide group support. I think we all know that in trauma related to violence, one of the strongest supports is community support. So we always prioritize group supports and making sure that those are available, because part of the experience of violence, I think, is really isolating and pushes people away from each other for shame or fear or confusion or anxiety, and we really want to make sure that people are coming back together as a community. It's our central value in the way that we do our work at STEPS, and I know with a lot of my partners that I've had a chance to work with as well. And then in addition to that, we do a lot of education and outreach in connection with our partners that I know everyone else is doing here too. We want to educate on healthy relationships. We want to educate on how to be a strong advocate for survivors. We are trying really hard. This has really been our primary prevention work over the last several decades, and I'm hopeful that that is building a strong foundation for us to expand our prevention work across all of our programs and make sure that we are doing intervention work alongside of prevention work every step of the way. So that's my segue into real strategies. I am either a talker for a very long time or brief, so I'm trying to be brief so that I can reserve most of the time to be part of a panel. So I see our strategies as kind of broken down into a few different areas. One is emergency response, which we highlighted in some services that STEPS provides, and I know, across our community we have those kinds of resources available to folks experiencing violence. And then intervention, so our ongoing supports available to folks in different program areas like I was describing, direct service support for survivors and people who've experienced harm, support groups, those are intervention resources we see, and then prevention work. Those are really part of one of the most important strategies, I think, is being able to also do what we say we're doing, which is trying to end domestic violence and end violence in our community. And that looks like education and training, education for our community members, as well as training for survivors, for us to develop skills and resiliency to break cycles of violence and live a life free from violence. And that really requires all of us to come together and support each other as community members. and see folks for more than an issue that they're presenting in front of us. You know, we're working with whole people. We might be working on a specific concern that they're dealing with, but they come to us with all of them and their family and challenges that they were navigating before they experienced violence and that they will continue to navigate after. And we try to meet them where they're at and really empower them to make decisions that will work for their lives in an ongoing way so we can be an ongoing support system. And I really think that those are the primary strategies to ending violence. And like I already said, I really think community is central to that. So it's really nice to see everybody here invested in caring community members, ready to make change and end violence in our community. So thank you.
I want to hand this just a second. Thank you very much, Nicole. And next we're going to hear from some of our city partners within our department. So Mary from the Burlington Police Department. I will hand one of these over so you don't have to share if you don't want to, but sharing is caring, so it's great. So we'll begin with Mary, and then we'll hear from Rachel, who is from, again, the Burlington Community Justice Center.
My name is Mary McAllister. I'm the domestic violence victim advocate for the Burlington Police Department. I've been there almost 29 and a half years, so maybe people in this audience know me, hopefully not. If you call Burlington PD and you're a victim of domestic violence or somebody calls on your behalf, you're going to speak with our dispatch, and then you're going to speak with the officers. And then hopefully you will speak with me at some point. And sometimes that's the same day, sometimes that's unfortunately maybe a week later. But I'm going to be tracking you down because I read through our complaints. I try to figure out how can I help you? And maybe I'm only helping you by just giving you information about resources in our community, like STEPS or HopeWorks. Or maybe I'm helping you with a protection order through the family court or answering custody, custody information. So I'm not going to push you into anything. I know that doesn't work, but I am going to try to give you as much information as possible so you can make really safe decisions for yourself. I'm part of a team. I've worked with all these people on this panel. I've worked with Ingrid for years. I've known her for years. And I'm part of when I started, I was the only person in the department doing this, but now I'm part of a group, the CAPE unit. We have social workers in our unit, and we also have Hannah Brislin, who's from the Community Justice Center. So I will turn that over to you.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Jolly. She, her pronouns. I'm the director, one of CEDO's assistant directors. I lead the Community Justice Center. So we are part of the city. We're part of the Community and Economic Development Office. And our mission is generally to use relationship-based, non-punitive approaches to accountability and repair of harm. So we use restorative practices in all types of programs. We have 16 staff in 3 locations, one of whom is at the Burlington Police Department as a victim services specialist. And then we have a bunch of staff at 200 Church Street, which is the Burlington Telecom building. And then we have 5 more staff at the courthouse, the Costello Courthouse. So we work throughout the continuum of crime and harm, from the preventative approaches, where we have a conflict assistance program working around neighborhood disputes, all the way through to post-reentry, after incarceration, where you have a program called Circles of Support and Accountability. Many of our programs rely on community volunteers because, as I mentioned, a relational approach to crime and harm views crime as relational first and foremost. So if something happens to you by a stranger, you are no longer strangers in some ways, in that you now have a relationship as a crime victim and somebody responsible for that harm or that crime. And so the repair of that, or the seeking accountability, tries to involve all the parties who were involved in that incident of harm or crime. And so we do get referrals throughout the continuum. So directly from police, what we call pre-charge, and Ingrid just talked about a pilot that would be one step before that, rapid response pre-charge. But pre-charge, and then we could get a referral from the state's attorney, but that is diverting from court. So an incident has been charged, but it's going to be through court diversion. So they have an opportunity to come to us first, or it could be after adjudication where a judge is ordering it, and the referral would come from probation and parole. So the responses that we offer are not always an either or. Either you're punished or you have this restorative response. Sometimes it's both and then sometimes it is an either or. Sometimes this is an option, an off-ramp out of the criminal legal system so that punishment is not going to be used first. Although we know from the complicated landscape that we have now, for some of our highest need folks, highest risk folks, the either or options are generally not an option, not appropriate, as well as our current existing systems are not really appropriate or meeting the need. We have newer, more complex interwoven issues now that none of, I think, the panelists in our current systems can address by themselves, and that's part of what these forums are about, is to introduce you, one, to the existing resources, but to show that we're continually having to create new responses. The rapid response is an example of that, as well as a new grant that we've just received. Actually, STEPS is one of the partners of a grant that we've just received from the Office of Violence Against Women. So federal money that's going to the Network to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, and they're subcontracting with a few partners in this county around restorative responses to sexual and domestic violence. So that's new. That's generally not, actually, it has been illegal for many, many years until last year. A law was passed to make an exception to the prohibition of sexual and domestic violent crimes coming in a non-punitive way, perhaps, like not using the criminal legal system. If a survivor, and we already know that a majority of survivors do not use the criminal legal system for those crimes. They're looking for other options. Not to say that many survivors do want to use the criminal legal system, and there's nothing wrong with that. We just know that in general, victims need a more nuanced toolbox. They need more options, and they need to have some agency and control in choosing those options. So this grant that we were just awarded allows a survivor to perhaps self-refer and say, I am a survivor of one of these crimes, but I want to actually stay in relationship perhaps with the person who's causing me harm. So just to use that as an example of these more out-of-the-box thinking, we're at a time where we know that our traditional systems are just not meeting the needs. And I will just add, in terms of some of the existing services around victims of crime that the CJC has, there's a program called Parallel Justice that's been in operation since 2006. It's a partnership with the Burlington Police Department and the Center for Crime Victim Services. And it's for any victim of crime who wants to report to the police or who doesn't. The responsible party does not have to be caught. It's just purely about victim services. So it's called Parallel Justice because it runs parallel to the criminal legal system. Sometimes you might be interfacing with that system, but whether or not you do, you have needs and rights as victims. And so Parallel Justice is oftentimes not very well known, but we want to remind everybody that it's out there to fill some gaps between the formal systems that exist and your needs. You might have all kinds of immediate needs for just emotional support and not counseling, but just the emotional support. Having somebody who's going to be listening well, who's going to believe you, and who will be talking out options if and when you want them about different ways to navigate the criminal legal system, for instance, or to get restitution, or to seek a restorative process with the one who harmed you, if that's the desire. So the Parallel Justice Program offers a number of different kinds of supports. And again, we have the victim services specialist located at BPD that works with that program, as well as somebody who works at the CJC in case for a variety of reasons you don't want to go through the police. And then lastly, I'll just say through all of the programs that I've mentioned, we have victim services specialists, because that idea of restorative practices always tries to center the victim, or at least be informed by the victim's desires. So often in the criminal legal system, the victim's not included, and it's the state versus John Doe. It's not the victim as part of that equation. Many times in prosecution, the victim's voice might be included in a victim impact statement, for instance, but they're not going to be looking to the victim to lead the process. In our processes in general, we're 100% of the time going to attempt to reach out to you as a victim. You always have the option of saying, pass, I want nothing to do with it. I don't even think actually that this problem should have come to the CJC. We hear that sometimes. But we also are always going to try and give you some options, or if or how you want to be included. And again, we rely on volunteers a lot, knowing that anytime there is crime or harm, the community is impacted, which is evidenced by you all coming here. We know that the number of instances of harm and that aren't necessarily a binary, somebody can be both a victim and a responsible party, have ripple effects into our community about the various ways of secondary trauma. And third, like we are all victims in some ways by being in Burlington right now and being present to all the suffering that's going on in so many levels. So I think that gives you a kind of an overview of the kinds of victim services that we offer, but I'm anxious to hear the questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mary, and thank you for your service, 29 and a half years. I think that deserves a round of applause. 29 and a half years with the City of Burlington. Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Rachel, too. I really appreciate it. So we're our last part of our panel, and then we're going to go into questions, which this is my moment to make sure they read my text. You're organizing the questions, right? So I don't have 50 to read. Amazing. So again, reminder, if you have a question, please bring it over so we can fold it in. And reminder, we will answer all of them. We may not get to all of them in the final 30 or 40 minutes we have. So the last part of our panel, I find, is almost, in many ways, frankly, as a mom, one of the most important parts of this conversation. And I really appreciate, again, Shamnan and former City Councilor Ali Dieng for being here. And we're going to begin first with Ali to talk a little bit about from his work with the New American Advisory Council, and then I'll have you two just pass the mic. Then we'll go over to Shamnan from the King Street Center.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Dieng. I'm a former city councilor who represented Ward 7 for 7 years, and I stepped down, let's say, last February. And while I created the Vermont New American Advisory Council with all the New Americans, I wanted to clarify that I am a social entrepreneur. I led that organization for the people now to run it. I am also the person who created the Burlington School District Parent University, and it's still greatly running, supporting parents from different socioeconomic backgrounds to find themselves, to help their children succeed in the school system. So I see myself as a social entrepreneur. So while I was a city councilor, we lost as a community a young Somalian named Hussein Mubarak. I hope that many people still remember that name. And it's from there that I thought that the city would actually take action around how do we support the New Americans to succeed and also to feel safe and to be part of just healthy activities. So we did not see any actions. And that's why I developed a proposal to the city in order for the Vermont New American Advisory Council to understand gun violence affecting New American communities. And from there, I ended up being the one who just worked on the project from 6 focus groups with over 100 New Americans, Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, all the leaders as well, to definitely understand why these kids are dying like this in this new place that they call home. We all New Americans, we all come from different cultures, but we all now call the city of Burlington our home. It was not normal, it was not moral. And from there, we developed really good questions about what are the issues. But what we found was just really mind-boggling. The issues that the youth are experiencing are starting from the school. I don't think that people are paying a lot of attention about what is happening really in the schools. If you go in a cafeteria, you won't see children mingling. No, you will see New Americans here, white people over there, and there is a problem. There is a sense of, the sense of belonging is something that we need to strive for. As a community, it is no longer enough to just bring the people here and now you're on your own. They need so much support. The family's composition of New Americans are different from so many different traditional American families. You, a father, a mother, or 2 fathers, 2 mothers, 1 child, But the new Americans, you have sometimes see a family with 6, 7, 8, 9 kids. At one point, the kids will want to leave home very early because there is a problem of space. And when they out of in the community, parents do not know what their kids are involved in, what they are doing. And the sense of a gang mentality is starting to develop into them. The no access to basic needs actually participated in why some of these kids were selling drugs or being in other activities, right? It is imperative for us as a community to support these young people, to feel safe, to feel welcome, to feel that they belong in this new place that they call home. I developed a report, and the report was submitted to the city on January 1st, December 31st, 2023. To date, we haven't seen any action, and those recommendations, whoever wants the report can ask the mayor's office, and you can read it. It's so thorough, and it's only touching the surface of the problem. The moral document of this community is the city's budget. One of the recommendations was very simple. Let's create a position within the city government that can focus on new American affairs. Parents are struggling to raise their kids. Parents are struggling to bring food on the table. Kids have no access to the basic need that they need. Kids are no longer feeling safe. It is time for all of us to move away from statements. It is time for us to take action. The mental breakdown of these families, you have to understand it in order to try to solve it. And there is nobody that can understand these families other than themselves, right? How many kids from the new Americans also are in the judicial system? Some of them for cases that they don't even understand what was happening to them, right? I think we need to look at those recommendations. There are 7 of them, and each and every single one of them is so important. And I believe that this city of Burlington can make it happen. This is their home, this is our home, this is our community, but the leaders of this city need to step up and find these families where they are in order for everyone to succeed. When I am succeeding and other people that look like me are not succeeding, then this city will just try to put bandages in problems, but will never solve them, right? Let's collaborate with the people that we serve. Let's hear really what they need to happen in order for them to feel safe and to feel welcome, and then let's take action to make it happen. Thank you, and we'll pass it to Shabna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shabnam Nolan. I'm the Executive Director of King Street Center. King Street, if you don't know, is a youth development organization. We serve youth from 18 months old to 18 years old. And there's about 180 youth and their families every year that we serve that come to our center. We operate 6 different programs for our kids and their families. And the majority of our families come from the South End and the immigrant refugee communities that are part of Burlington. First, I just like to double tap on everything Ali said. There's a lot to unpack from what he said there, but it is pretty significant to understand some of the divide that's happening within families between the child and their caregivers. What we're seeing with youth right now, a lot of our high school students, they need support figuring out what to do after high school. They need that sense of belonging. They need to know that people care about them. And that needs to start a lot earlier. We're starting to see behaviors, challenging behaviors earlier and earlier, starting in elementary school. Literacy levels of our Black boys in particular are way too low. And we see it happening in our center as well. You can watch it. The child, they are happy and excited and want to learn and they go along their educational journey and they do not have the reading levels that are required for them to be successful. And so what happens is by the time they hit middle school, it's a whole lot easier to be the kid that's funny or who just doesn't show up than it is to be the kid who's not smart or called stupid or made fun of by their peers. And so they stop engaging. In the high school, in that cafeteria, in addition to maybe the division of the types of kids, there's also kids who don't leave the cafeteria. They sit there all day, and it's very difficult to get them to go to school. Now they're showing up, which means the school is meeting a need that they have, but they're not engaging in their education. Families are stressed. Our kids, by the time they hit 13 years old, are looking for ways to generate income to support their families. Family is very important in this community and in these communities. And everyone has a responsibility to participate and support and be a part of that family. So you can imagine as a 13-year-old what that could mean if you feel a great sense of responsibility. A lot of kids feel scared. I think that fear has grown over the last few years. Kids don't know not just what's going to happen inside their home, but outside of their home. What's going to happen if they walk home from the center in the dark? Families are scared because they don't want their kids playing outside when they know that there's a lot of drugs surrounding them outside. And because a lot of our families live in small spaces and they live with many folks in that small space, like all teenagers, the kids want out and they want to be out and about. They don't want to go home. Parents don't know where they are. They're, out hopefully at the center, but not always. And they need places to be. So some of the solutions, I think in addition to the recommendations in the report that I want to touch on, when a couple of summers ago, there was that increase in gun violence and the Somali community in particular was greatly impacted, losing their children both to on both sides of the violence. And we were talking with the school district. We decided as an organization it was time to pull people together and have the youth serving organizations that serve the teen population start talking to one another. We all know each other, but we had not been coming together as a collective force. So we started last January what is called the Burlington Youth Collaborative. It includes 8 different organizations that serve teens in Burlington. It also includes the school district. And we've met a handful of times now, and what we're trying to do is identify what are the resources for teens in our community, what are the gaps, and then how could we collectively come together to address at least a piece of the gap. So I'm hopeful that collaborative can do some good work together and take some action. Mentorship is one of the programs that we have. I cannot underscore the importance of mentorship for these kids. We have quite a few kids right now who are asking for mentors. Specifically, we have young boys who want mentors, who want male mentors, and we do not have enough male mentors volunteering. So one really tangible action that you can take is to be a mentor. We've been collaborating with the city and talking with the city. Ingrid and I have talked quite a bit, looking at different cities in other areas to see what it is they're doing and if there's anything from there that we can take. One of the pieces that I think is really important as we look towards solutions is thinking about what programs we do have and what programs we don't have for youth. We do not have enough intervention programs. Organizations like King Street Center are prevention organizations. The majority of organizations serving teens in Burlington are prevention organizations. I believe we're beyond just prevention, and it's time to do what I call pre-intervention and intervention programming. And finally, I guess I'll say that the other solution is we need programs, more programs, that invest in youth that are prevention programs and that financially resource them to participate. Like I said, it is really, really important that families have their basic needs met, and quite frankly, they don't. And so children are helping to make that possible, and they need to be resourced to invest in their future.
Thank you to both of you for what as I said before, really I feel like it's one of the most important pieces we can be doing, making sure we are very clear-eyed and focused on our young people and our obligation as the adults in this community to do right by them and understand what their advocates and the folks who work with them every day are seeing and telling us. So we're going to move now into the question portion of this. I'm looking at my team over there of how we're going to go about this. Because you've been organizing all the questions, hopefully, so we can do this in an organized fashion. Do you want to state the question, and then we'll see who? Yep, why don't you come use this mic?
I'm going to start with picking up the microphone. Hi everybody, all my Burlingtonian friends and neighbors. I'm Erin Jacobson, and I am the mayor's chief of staff. I'm going to start with these questions because they are questions directly for our panelists. So the first one is, I think this would be a good one for you, Shabnam. It is there a youth, I can't read without my reading glasses. Is there a youth community center and community programming for after school?
Yes. So, like I said, we have 6 different programs that we run. We run after-school programs for kindergarten through 12th grade, and they are with us from right after school until right around 6 o'clock. And I like to say that when school's in, we're in, and when school's out, we're still in. So during breaks, during summer, King Street is there to support children and their families. We're not the only one. There are other organizations that have after-school programs in Burlington. The Boys and Girls Club is another organization that does after-school programming. And the schools themselves also have after-school programs. I will just say that again, it's not enough. We have a wait list in every single one of our programs. And the closure of Sarah Holbrook is a loss to the community.
I love the King Street Center, and I love Shabnan. I love everything that she does, you know. And the report that I was just talking about, actually, the recommendation number 3, please listen very carefully, is to develop an after-school program, develop after-school program opportunities by and for new Americans that will encompass their cultural and religious beliefs. There is a strong difference, and this is something that the parents really ask for. And it's very specific, and they know why. Because at the same time, if they go to other programs, they same time losing their culture and also their religion. But they want to see something that really was developed for them and for their children. Wanted to add that. Thank you.
I just also wanted to say AALV does a lot of programming for youth as well after school.
Great, thank you both. This is for Nicole at STEPS. Is your education helping at the high school level? Do you provide info to teens regarding safe, healthy relationships?
I'll just take that. Okay. I can also project. Yes, our education programming actually has been primarily in the high schools. We have strong relationships with the health programs at most high schools in Chittenden County. We actually have a federal grant project in partnership with some other organizations in Colchester School District where we're getting more deeply engaged with the students. We provide them with presentations in their health classes around healthy relationships, also digital citizenship, because online interactions is really challenging for young folks these days. So we've been developing more programming in that area. And with our partnership in Colchester School District, we're able to offer actual like drop-in hours for students to talk about relationships and training for teachers and administrators and support staff for students so that they know how to respond to youth experiences of violence, both dating violence and also being exposed to domestic violence in their households, which we think is really important.
Thank you, Nicole. You can hand the mic to Mary. And Mary, I don't know if you'll know the answer, but Chief Murad is here too. In case not, this question is, how many registered social workers are in the police department ranks? How many do you hope to have?
Where's the chief?
Right there.
I mean, I can talk, we have the community support liaisons. We have 6 plus a supervisor right now.
Great. You want to add anything to that, Chief?
That is our full staff, or we are fully staffed now with our community support liaisons, or CSLs. That is 6 plus supervisor. We also have the assistant director of CAPE, who is also a social worker. We also have most of our CARES team now. We have the CARES clinical supervisor and one of the 2 CARES clinicians that we are allotted. And so along with Mary and also Hannah Brislin, who is an employee of CEDO but sits at the Burlington Police Department, that is the CAPE team. CAPE is crisis assessment intervention programs, and is a new thing that we've developed over the past 4 years in the department. It's really unique among police departments in the state, and we're pretty close to fully staffed in it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mary. And you can pass the mic to Rachel. Rachel, are you supporting public schools to use restorative justice practices too? And also, does the CJC support businesses as well?
Great. So in terms of the schools, we've had an over 10-year relationship with the Burlington School District. We used to be more present in the schools than we are now. We don't currently have a contract or a formal partnership with them, but that's mostly because ARPA dollars allowed them to build up their own more internal supports, restorative practitioners. Given those dollars went away, I'm not sure of the current standing of how many there are left. I don't think there's as many as there were last year. But overall, the school district has tried to build up its own resourcing and expertise around that. So the short answer is no, not right now. We don't work within the schools, although I will say we're doing a pilot. When we talked about pilots, we're always trying new things, and we are working with Edmonds Middle School on a pilot using more of family group conferencing, which is a kind of restorative practice to use the supports of a youth that are built in, rather than having strangers or people who are paid to do the support work, have their natural supports come in to look at an incident or an issue and try and get at those underlying issues to see like what are the various resources that may still be needed, or what are the barriers that are helping them perform well. So that's something we're trying out, but it's not a formal partnership in that we're just piloting something without money, exactly, to make it more sustainable or ongoing. And in terms of the second question, I forgot it.
Do you also support businesses?
Yeah, the short answer is yes, we do support businesses. It can look different in terms of depending on the kinds of restitution support or the ways we can come in, but parallel justice absolutely can support businesses, and the crimes that I talked about in terms of using victim services specialists, where you're going to have outreach. If you as a business owner or a business manager were impacted by a crime, then we're going to be reaching out to see, explain more of where we can and can't be of use. And also sometimes businesses are secondarily impacted. For instance, the Red Square shooting that happened a few months ago now, While there were direct parties involved in terms of the person responsible for that shooting and the person directly impacted, the victim of that shooting, there was also many indirect victims. Anybody who was at the bar that night or who might have been a witness, as well as the staff who worked there. We're going to try and do more and more to reach out to those secondary victims when we know of them. They're not always in our purview, but for instance, we were able to reach out to the business owner there and talk to, say what we could offer. And it seemed like they were very thankful for that kind of outreach.
Thank you, Rachel. One more question for our youth advocate folks that just came in. Are there peer support programs for you?
I guess, yeah, I'm not quite sure what that question means in terms of peer support programs. I think maybe my best answer to that is within at least our programming. I would argue that there is quite a bit of peer support that naturally occurs. In addition to that, we will run at various points, depending upon if the youth ask us to, groups. So we've had a girls group, for example, so that the girls can have an opportunity to talk with one another and talk about things maybe they don't want to say in front of their male counterparts of the same age. Beyond that, I think that the school does run some peer groups, whether it's during the day or they have variety of student councils and such that they utilize, but I'm not sure beyond that.
Thank you. We have a few questions that are kind of in the line of what is Burlington doing to try to get some help from the state or other communities? And there were a couple of questions that were asking that, in particular, to help folks meet their basic needs, and in particular with housing. And I would pose this to the mayor, but of course, with all these questions, we would invite panelists to add if you have anything to add as well.
Thank you, Erin. So since even when I was mayor-elect and in the transition with former Mayor Weinberger, we were working actively to try to engage in partnership with the state. And that was back, if you all remember, back in March. They were ramping down the first phase of the GA emergency housing program, which people often call the motel program. And during that phase, there was a lot of abruptness here in Burlington around whether because we were winding down, which doesn't even stand anymore, the VFW emergency shelter that the city ran last year out of just desperation because we didn't have enough emergency beds. And so as that was ending mid-March or so, a massive ice and snowstorm was coming in, and the state suddenly put up an emergency shelter for a week in the Cherry Street old building, right? And there was a lot of, again, abrupt and broken communication, I would say, early on. And my goal has really been, since becoming mayor, smoothing that out, making it a regular and working relationship and working communication. And it is still a work in progress. Since April, we have met and brought to the city the Agency of Human Services, which is the big agency of the state that oversees the Department of Mental Health, Department of Health itself. It oversees the DCF. It oversees many different aspects that are impacting the various issues that we're seeing here in the city. The secretary came, several of her commissioners came. We gave them a tour of Burlington to really put a finer point, a visual point on our compounding issues of untreated mental health issues, the substance use issues here in our city, and most importantly, the vast number of people who are unsheltered. And that was in the middle of the summer. That was before we had even more folks exited from the motel programs in the middle of September. And so what we've been continuing to do is ask for continued conversation, having the state officials come to Burlington, and I've repeatedly asked the governor to come. And so we finally did get a meeting just last week with Governor Scott, and it was in Montpelier, and my whole team went. We brought our CEDO specialist to end homelessness to specifically, again, educate, honestly, and not go in with a an agenda where we were going to criticize. I think I'm a big believer in relationship building as a former community and labor organizer, and I know we can get more done when we can actually find some common ground and tell the true story of Burlington. And so that's what we did. We talked about those three big topics again, but we spent a lot of time talking around the reality and the impact that this housing emergency is having on our city. We brought a memo we shared with the governor and his team around the fiscal impact. Not that we want to minimize this to money, but we've invested upwards to $6-7 million of local resources here in the city across all of our departments since just January of this year. And I only mention that because we have dug very deep here in the city of Burlington, because the right thing to do is to find a humane approach to this emergency, but it cannot be Burlington alone that is doing this. And we made that very clear to the governor. And we did some basic education, because one point was raised, well, hasn't Burlington had an up and down experience with homelessness before? And isn't this sort of similar to what maybe you experienced in the 90s? I don't want to tell you how old I was. I was certainly not living in Burlington at the time. I wasn't here. But we were able to fact check that, and again, in a professional and collegial way, to say, no, actually, we are giving you the numbers of simply unsheltered people. That does not even count the full count of homeless people experiencing homelessness that have a shelter bed or are living in some sort of housing arrangement. The governor did a lot of listening, to be honest. There weren't a lot of active solutions presented at the time, but we strongly made the case for Burlington, knowing that this is a burden on our ability to build an affordable city for all of us, our ability to find humane and sustainable answers, to make sure that we aren't just simply saying all we have for you is living outside to survive, and that we can't build enough shelter beds fast enough. We are doing, again, above and beyond. Hopefully the COTS shelter will open soon-ish, but it's not hopeful looking for December 1st. We're at some point this winter will open, but even that will only be 40 more beds for emergency shelter beds. And we need all kinds, low barrier, medium barrier, high barrier. We need it all, because there's hundreds of people now in the city of Burlington and in the immediate area needing shelter. So it's a complicated one, because we also need the state and the state legislature to be a partner in understanding we're in this acute moment in Vermont history where we cannot build enough housing, whether it's shelter housing, transitional housing, permanent housing, and all the wraparound services needed. We are in this acute moment, I predict, over the 2 to 3 years of really needing to come up with some faster and better solutions. And we have not done it yet. And we need to really get the governor and the legislature into a serious conversation. Oh, yes, please, Nicole.
I did want to just mention, because the question was about emergency housing, that we do receive support from the state. The Agency of Human Services Office of Economic Opportunity funds a lot of our emergency housing. We receive over $1 million in funding for motel lodging for survivors when our shelter is full, which is all the time. And we also receive almost as much for shelter operations and housing supportive services through AHS.
In contrast to that, we don't receive anywhere near any level of funding for supporting youth from the state that you just mentioned, that you all get at STEPS. We have one grant right now from an act that was passed a couple years ago, Act 78. And I think it's, oh gosh, don't quote me on this, somewhere around $50,000 a year. It's a short-term grant. Otherwise, it's private philanthropy, and it's funds from private foundations, and then child care subsidy. And so I don't know what this, all the things that the state's doing in terms of support, but I know what they could be doing. And they could be putting more state dollars towards youth programming.
For saying that out loud, Shabnam, I did not know that. Well, here's a stack that's, I don't know, there's several here that are expressing concerns around a lack of accountability, in particular for open air drug use and drug sales. And before I pose some specifics regarding this line of questions, I do just want to let everyone know that in January, which is our next public forum on community safety, we are going to focus on substance use. So there does seem to be a lot of interest and concern around that. So come back in January for more on that, just one particular topic, again, with panelists who can speak to a range of issues there. But regarding these questions, it is about a seeming lack of accountability that people are seeing and experiencing and wondering about. How can we have more accountability? How can we address what we're seeing with the opioid epidemic? And it's not just opioids anymore, as we know. Some acknowledgement that this is having a negative effect on our community and our youth. And what are some ways for how we could do better? There was also a question specifically, have we considered incentivizing the behavior we want to see instead of trying to just punish our way to public safety, with others wondering about whether we should be punishing more. Big topic, I know, and we don't have all the time in the world, but do you want to touch on it, Mayor?
Well, this is exactly why we're doing a January forum just on this topic. So I will try to do a little bit of an overview. So as we know, there's the supply side, there's the use side, and then there's all the gaps within the state of Vermont around how we address both sides of that. And I also want to come back to youth in just a minute, because I think one of the things we have to be very clear about is who's most harmed in all of these cycles of use. And Shamna was mentioning, or Ali was mentioning a little bit around, we have to remember young people are getting sucked into some of the economics of this in a state that is so vulnerable within this larger system for which we're existing in. And so first, I just want to begin on the supply level. I do want to really commend our Burlington Police Department in its close partnership with the DEA and the U.S. District Attorney. We are doing a sizable amount of interruption of supply into the city, but more comes in, right? And I brought this up with the governor, and I made the point of saying, again, this is much larger than the city of Burlington, a mayor, a council, even a whole entire police department, and even a great partnership with the DEA to interrupt that solely. What else are we able to do as a state, as a rural state that's very vulnerable to the supplies from these larger cities? It is something that he sort of, I have to be frank, he didn't have an answer really to that. And there was a little bit of a focus of more on just have folks stop using drugs. And I wish it were that simple. I think we all at this point know that the stuff in the drug supply is highly addictive. It changes people's brain chemistry. It's a medical disorder. We are in a new time. And as someone who was raised in the in the DARE era, of the back to the 90s, y'all, back to the 90s, that is not a solution. That is not a solution that reflects modern day reality, at least here in Vermont. And it also fails to understand all the different paths we need to get people to actual treatment that's long enough, that's accessible for folks economically, among other things. And that's, again, a failure on the state level to really update and make more available treatment that's available when people are ready to go. When we get to the point of opening an overdose prevention center, I've never said that's the end all. It's another tool in the toolkit to create relationships that are fundamental, of getting people these trusted pathways to find a way to treatment, but then they need somewhere to go. They need somewhere where they can be to address the kind of substance that they are on and the pathway to recovery that we hopefully put them on as a state. That is a bit on the use side. The other side of this, of course, is helping people meet their basic needs. You have compounding issues, of course, co-occurring experiences around untreated mental health, lack of secure housing, inability to meet your basic needs, the despair and pressures of COVID. I mean, we've all experienced that to some extent. The use of substances, we've all probably had at least know someone or personally have had that experience in that dance you do. So I bring a lot of compassion to this conversation. And also, it's not as simple as just the people who are openly using drugs in our street, making them go away. I mean, I walk through City Hall Park every morning, every night. People are deeply suffering at this point. The other side of it is the folks getting wrapped up in also being harmed in this cycle, and that's back to the youth, right? So when we have the inability to support young people and the inability to support families meeting their basic needs, people get desperate and they find the easiest way to make the economics work. And a lot of our youth have been sucked into this. So before we jump to further criminalization or steps strengthening statutes, we have to understand who else is getting swept up in that if we go to that step immediately. And that's a lot of young folks. It's a lot of Black and brown youth. And I am just as concerned around their outcomes in their lives of where they're headed. If we are not figuring out other ways to get back upstream around prevention, interruption, other pathways where we can resource them, have other ways to support their families, meeting their basic needs. So that is the last option that becomes the easiest viable thing for them to do. There's a lot of moving parts, which is again why I was a little bit frustrated, frankly, that the governor sort of gave me a DARE program response. We need a more nuanced response. We need a more active and proactive response. We need resourcing in many different areas. And we really need to get to work on this. More to come in January, because I am certainly not the end-all expert.
Do you know enough about it to talk about it? Say what you know.
There will be people in here who know more than I do, but I was quite excited to learn recently about a program that is based on incentives, that is a partnership with the Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform and the Johnson Health Clinic or Health Center. They are working with the state's attorney's office in Chittenden County to identify people who, a small number of people, but who have like a really outsized number of charges, and who are struggling with addiction. And it's an incentive program where it's sort of like steps out of this cycle that is so deadly. And it was really inspiring to listen to it. We learned about it at the ComStat meeting. I know there are people in here who know more than I do. So, but their initial numbers were really promising. Even Dr. Levine was sort of partnered with them and had oversight into the program. And I know that there are people who are talking about it nationally as kind of quite remarkable. So.
And maybe we can make sure that we have someone in January who can speak more to it. I think that would be a really, really useful thing for our community to hear about. Here's some questions about, they're in the vein of what can community members do to contribute and to help find productive ways to help keep ourselves and our neighbors safe.
Yes, and I think the first element is for each and every single one of us to understand that safety is not at the discretion of only the mayor's office of the city council. It's a responsibility of each and every single one of us to also understand that when it comes to youth, reach out maybe to the Burlington School District if you have a beautiful car and just say, I want be available to send especially young youth girls to sports and then take them back home. Because if you look right now, there is a problem that some parents are talking about, why youth girls are not participating in high school sports. Most of them is a lack of transportation and also a sense of safety. They can't walk home. I think that's something really concrete. Another element also would be to understand that it's not everything that you need to call the police for as community members. And I think sometimes it is just trusted community members. If you identify a youth in trouble, do not call the police, but try to find out someone who knows the family so that people can talk to them. Sometimes it's just an aspect of moving away from just calling the police all the time and give them your time, your energy, be a mentor, right? Take them to places that they've never been and give them hope and the sense of belonging.
I said it before, mentoring is one concrete way that a community member can support. I know people are busy and have busy lives and young children, and so that might be difficult to do in the community. But we also have what we call the Book Buddy program, and it's 45 minutes, one time a week, reading or doing educational games with our kids in the kindergarten through 5th grade program. So it's a shorter commitment, but an important one as well. And because I have the mic and I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise, I will say that if neither of those are an option for you and time isn't, treasure can be. And so donating your financial resources to organizations that are serving youth in the community so we can expand those services is another way to help.
The panels, restorative panels. In terms of ways that I'm seeing that one could help, one is just by being that active neighbor of asking if you're okay. And that doesn't always feel safe. It's not always appropriate to approach somebody, but certainly in some situations, just by asking the question, somebody is feeling maybe perhaps more connected and cared about than they were a minute before. That's a lot of what we do too, is when we are trying to get at the underlying roots of what happened, it's generally asking that larger question of what's going on in one's life that might have led to a problematic behavior. So just as a neighbor, and I mean, Front Porch Forum is a great forum for active neighboring, active participation of caring about your neighborhood and seeing what are opportunities to help, as well as speaking out when you need help. At the CJC, as I mentioned, we rely on volunteers for some of our programs, and that is a way that people can see that somebody who is not even paid cares to show up and say, how are you and how can I be a part of ensuring your success? So our Circles of Support and Accountability program for folks who are deemed high risk coming out of the incarceration back into the community, that's a year-long engagement, a year-long commitment where you're meeting with a core member, as we call them, once a week for a year, and ensuring they've already served, like the accountability part has already been done. They've served time in prison. Now we're trying to really ensure their success as they come back in and saying, how can we support you in your leisure skills, in your time where you where you have free time, or support you in a number of conditions that have been put on your release. What if you can use the internet at all, where you can go, where you can live, where you can work, things like that. That does increase somebody's risk of reoffending. If we had that kind of, if I had that many conditions put on my mobility and livelihood and all those parameters, I'd be more risky of reoffending, just not necessarily the same crime, but just messing up on the, slipping up on those conditions. So that takes a village to ensure somebody's success, and that's a program that we're almost always recruiting for. And then in terms of restorative processes, we're always trying to support the various identities that show up in front of us in terms of folks who are responsible as well as who are impacted by crime. So we have a program called Cultural Advocates where we're trying to diversify the communities that people are coming from as our volunteers. We generally tend to get a lot of white retiree age volunteers, which is fabulous, and that's not necessarily mirroring all the folks who are coming to us as responsible parties and impacted parties. So if you happen to hold a more marginalized identity, please reach out to talk, ask about our Cultural Advocate program. That's a paid opportunity. That's because we know that sometimes if you're already having some barriers, if you do hold marginalized identities, volunteering and during the day may not be the most appropriate thing that feels accessible to you. So Cultural Advocates is a fairly new program where we're trying to help the folks who are coming to us feel seen and heard and recognized, and seeing somebody like them in the room can help already make them feel a little more included or at ease in terms of talking about their vulnerabilities.
Yes, thank you. I just want to really quickly echo what everyone else has said around engaging with supportive services and volunteering, but also let's not forget that we're neighbors and that we can take care of each other outside of organizational volunteering as well. We have a lot of resources for everyone, but you can make a meal for your neighbor who you know is struggling or having to work late. You can, like you said, provide a ride. I mean, these are things that we can do for each other that we don't need a nonprofit organization to facilitate. It's easy to go inward when we're afraid and stressed and overwhelmed with everything that's going on, and that's the opposite of the solution from my perspective. And I just want to also encourage folks to have compassion for the people that you don't understand. You might not understand everything that they're going through, and there may be real impacts on your family safety, and that's very reasonable. But everybody is going through their own battle, and it's really important for us to see folks' humanity and know that we don't know what's going on with everyone.
Thanks, Nicole, for that. And just building on that, I know when I became mayor, I remember when I first moved to Burlington, there seemed to be this, I call it the community brigade, but there seemed to be these organized Operation Snow Shovel and graffiti and Adopt a Storm Drain, all these types of pieces. And since COVID, a lot of our AmeriCorps programming through CEDO sort of dried up with funding. And it is definitely an area, I'm not saying we're about to launch this, but it is an area I'm really curious about because we get asked this question often, and I get asked this question often around what can I do for my community? And I think coming out of COVID, all the compounding issues that we are talking about in all these community safety forums, it has changed the connectivity, the sort of the fascia between us in this city and in this community. And we want to find and be able to elevate and amplify as the city ways for you to come back to each other. When we take up space together, when we build community, what Nicole was just saying, that is such an important piece of it that is not the job of the mayor or the council or even nonprofits to do, but to actually build that muscle back up in the city. And we're going to be trying to offer kind of the framework for that as we get a handle back on graffiti and snow removal and all the ways we can reconnect. But it's also about taking up space in your own neighborhoods and coming into the downtown. And I can't emphasize that enough when we think about supporting our local businesses and supporting the public space and the health of that space. This is our space, the library, to come and to be part of that.
Thank you, Mayor. And we are about out of time, and there's a few folks who asked a question that I think would be a really great question for anyone on this panel and this panel collectively. But just quickly, we did not get to all of your questions. And we got a number of questions about how our police department is understaffed, and are we working to try to get our police staffed back up? And yes, we are working very hard on that. How else are we supporting the police department? We're working very hard on that as well, trying to find a way that we can make sure our department has better facilities, more modern facilities, that we're collaborating across our public safety entities. And there's a lot we can say about any one department, but we're thinking about this collectively. Folks also wanted to make sure that we are being proactive ahead of what we can predict we might see with the Trump administration, with marginalized folks experiencing more bias and hate, and we are also doing that. We've been here before, and we know what is likely coming. And as the mayor said to me first thing the morning after the election, she understands the assignment. And I think we all do. And it's one of the most beautiful things about being in this community. So, but here's the question. The last question for the whole panel is, how will we measure when we are a safer community? How do we know when we're at a place where we have seen some success with our goals around community safety?
Seems like a really good closer to see what everyone's take on that is. So I'm going to start with former Councilor Dieng to start us, and then we'll go down the line.
Yes, I think it's a very good question. And when we no longer have these type of forums anymore, we know that this city is now striving, right? But I think it is also about when we start to rebuild trust with the minority community groups, because they no longer trust the safety institutions. That's what we found in this. I think as individuals, to not fear your neighbor, to not fear the unknown, but to build and strengthen healthy relationship, because at the end of the day, we all are human beings, right? We will know that we are now striving and safe community when we no longer see a lot of people struggling in our streets, the parks, right? And I think we will see it when we no longer see needles even anywhere in this community. But from my perspective, and also as a closing thought, it will be imperative for us to work on prevention and to invest heavily on the future generation, on the youth, especially those from different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone.
I think when we don't have a single wait list in any of our programs and there's enough programming for kids to have a place to be when they're not at school and they're not at home, and when those programs are well funded enough so that the youth also have financial resources through that programming. We have examples of this right now. There are programs both at King Street and at other youth organizations that do offer youth skill building opportunities and pays them to be able to participate in that so that they can have their basic needs met, their families can have their basic needs met, and they can actually see a future for themselves and stay focused on it. So I think we'll know we're in a safe community when youth know they belong here, they're cared about, they are not having the literacy scores that show that they're not at the level they should be for comprehension, and they're actually really prioritized in our community.
I would answer that. I think that we're just, as a society, we're always going to have the kinds of struggles that we have, but I think when we have a more cohesive safety response system that is really rowing in the same direction and working together, where one area recognizes, okay, this isn't our expertise, but we have a partner right here who is going to be there. So it's just working with the realities of what our society and our world really are dealing with, but in a more partnered and respectful and efficient way.
I'll be brief because I'm curious what this half of the table also wants to say. But I do think I'm going to sound like former Mayor Bernie Sanders, who I think went on to do some other things. But it's going to really truly about when people can meet their basic needs. And that is a social determinant of people's well-being and health and well-being. And I think not only for all the generations, but their families, their caregivers, et cetera. So when people can more easily meet their basic needs, and we will feel that as a community. And I also am looking forward to the day where you can feel both the vibrancy and the diversity of this community, and you can see it because people are out and they're proud and they're engaged in their community every day.
My response isn't much different than that, but I think that there are a lot of measurable ways that we can see it, including having the majority of our funding not be for housing and for family systems and supportive resources when housing is not a crisis anymore in our community is huge. But I also think we focus a lot on the quality of services that we provide, and it's really a feeling that we have of connection and safety in our communities when we're together. We're not like facing our phones, but we're looking at each other and engaging with each other and caring about each other. And I think that we can feel that and we can see it, and that will be a real indicator that we're on the right track.
I would say when mediation is on the top of my list of what I would recommend to people versus how to disappear and how to hide from your abuser.
Thank you, Mary. And I resonate with a lot of these answers, especially the basic needs question. And I just want to make sure that when I say basic needs, it's also about that sense of connection. The sense of belonging and part of something, that somebody feels a part of any kind of community, is absolutely a universal and basic need. And when we look across at our 10 diverse programs, the one metric that we can find in common with any of our programs that would show somebody is better off after they've come to us would be asking, have you made one more community connection? Is there something on your own where you're not necessarily being referred in a reactive way, but you now have a proactive connection to somebody or an organization as well, but something where you know that in times of need you could go, that's a sign of success. So certainly the general data, like aspirationally, no more houselessness, no more violence to solve issues, and no more demand for drugs. We know the supply is an issue, but what is creating this huge demand? I think it has a lot to do with our cyclical chronic trauma and the adverse childhood experiences that for generations went unrecognized and untreated, and that has caused a world full of pain and suffering where people are looking for all kinds of painkillers. And so at that aspirational level, I think success would be we're no longer looking for painkillers.
And so with that, I want to thank Rachel and Mary and Nicole and Ingrid and Shamnan and Ali for being here. I want to thank you all of you for coming and engaging in these conversations. I want to thank the department heads who are here. I know Chief Murad is here. Chief LaChance is floating somewhere. I saw several other, Cindy White, who's the department head of our parks. I think I even saw our HR director here. There's a lot of folks in the city who work and care deeply, including all of you, to make this community stronger every day. So thank you. Reminder, our next one is on January 9th. This space will be announced soon, about 5:30 to 7. This one will be focused on substance use, and that will be the sole focus of that forum, and you're all invited. It is recorded by Town Meeting TV. It will probably be a similar or somewhat different kind of format. I want to remind you, if you love a public forum where you get the mic, City Council, see you on Tuesday, see you on the following Monday. We really do try to diversify these modes of engagement so that it can be accessible for all folks, and we can try some new things for community engagement. So thank you very much, and have a good night.